Hi everybody, hope you're well. This is part 24 of 31 Days in August. And it's a Friday, and seeing as we're getting close to the end of this whole daily video thing that I just started, which seems so long ago at the beginning of August, I thought I would do one of my favourite story arcs in a comic book of all times, from one of my favourite writers in comics of all times. You've probably heard me go on about this guy before. It's he's done so many things. He's written The Punisher for Marvel Comics. He's also reimagined the beginnings of Nick Fury as well for Marvel. He's done so many different things for DC Comics. He's written comics like Preacher, Hitman. He's also done his own series for Dynamite called The Boys. I'm talking about, of course, Garth Ennis, who I think is just an amazing writer. He manages to put the right amount of emotional balance, for me anyway, the right amount of emotional balance in a story. One minute you'll be laughing your head off, the next minute you will be worried about what's going to happen next. The next minute you will be feeling like you're going to throw your lunch up because of the most grotesque, disgusting thing you've possibly ever seen, until the next comic that he writes, and then you'll know you can see worse than that. This series is now the longest running series that DC has on its publication books. Beforehand, it wasn't. I mean, it was just another series. I mean, until September last year, this comic was probably the longest running comic. In fact, yeah, it is the longest running comic from the DC Vertigo imprint they have. Now it is the longest running comic that DC Comics has on a whole, and it's Hellblazer. And it's Garth Ennis' first story arc from Hellblazer, which is called Dangerous Habits, which ran from Hellblazer 41 to 46. There's number 1, there's number 41. These are absolutely gorgeous painted covers they have for these. 42, 43, 44, 45, and 46. Now these come out in when was it? Early 90s, about 1991, and it was around about this time that I was picking up my comics from a local newsagent, because in those days you could get comics in this country from specialist retailers like Forbidden Planet or other local comic book shops, but comic book shops weren't that well known here, sort of thing. So a lot of the comics that DC and Marvel sold were sold through newsagents, just normal newsagents. This particular newsagent in the town here, they still. I walk in there now. I mean, I go in there every now and then to see if I can pick up my copy of Dark Side magazine, and even now the guy that owns it recognises me. He said, "Oh, hello, how are you? Are you okay? You still collect comics?" I said, "Yes, I still buy the comics. Yes, unfortunately, you don't sell them anymore because of the weird direct market thing they have now." I don't have conversations like that with them, but you understand. So yeah, this was probably one of the first suggested for mature reader comics that I actually picked up. Beforehand, I was only picking up comics like The Flash, Justice League, the one that was written by Keith Giffen, the odd Batman, Superman comics that they had there, Firestorm the Nuclear Man by John Ostrada, various other series like that, you know. And I would probably say that this is the first. This was more than likely one of the first, if not the first, suggested for mature reader comics that I picked up, and I was just hooked from the first issue. Give you a rundown of the story. John Constantine is screwed big time. He's dying. It's not from one of his enemies. It's not from one of those mystical enemies. It's not from somebody who has, you know, taken a grudge against him and is trying to kill him. It's not through the demon blood that he has got running through his veins, which he got given to him a few issues back. It's from his own body. His own body is fighting him, and it's all because of the cigarettes he smoked. The massive amounts of cigarettes he smoked, the 20 to 30 a day that he smoked, it's all finally catching up with him. He's got lung cancer, and it's terminal. He wakes up one morning, starts coughing, thinks he's brought up some phlegm or some mucus and that. It's not until he looks in his sink that he realises that it's not that. It's actually part of him. It's part of his lungs that he's coughing up. He goes to the doctors. They do tests. They find out that yes, it is terminal. He's not going to be able to get out of this one. He is going to die from lung cancer. He goes through the whole gambit of, you know, the steps of realizing that you're going to die, denial, anger, you know, all the steps that they say you'll go through when you have something like this. He goes through them all. And at the end, he decides that it might not have been magic that screwed his life over this time, but he's going to make sure that it's magic that helps him. So he goes over to Ireland to see a friend, an old friend of his called Brendan, who lives in this old rundown lighthouse on the coast. He goes to Brendan, they chat, they reminisce about old times, and Brendan tells him that he sold his soul to the devil for the secrets of magic. And the day that he dies, he's got until midnight when the first of the fallen will come to take his soul to hell. Constantine turns around to him and says, well, I've actually come to ask you a favour, actually. I know you know a lot about magic. You probably know more about magic than me, and I was hoping you'd be able to help me. He explains to his friend Brendan, and Brendan just bursts into laughter and turns around and says, that's funny, I was going to ask you the same question. Turns out that his mate Brendan has got big problems with his liver and kidneys. They're closing down years and years of abuse from drinking countless amounts of bottles of wine, alcohol, and anything else that had alcohol in it. Has shot his body up, and he's dying as well. So they decide to do anything they can do, and that's get blind drunk. It's at this point that Brendan turns around to Constantine and says that he's got a little secret. He's found a well that was supposedly blessed by St. Patrick himself, and when the right incantation is done with the right symbols, it can be turned into whatever the person who has made the incantation wants it to be turned into. So Brendan lights the candles, draws the pentagram, creates the magic, and he turns around to John Constantine and says, Jesus turned water into wine, but I've got plenty of wine here, and we are in Ireland. So he turns it into stout, and it's the finest stout either of them have ever tasted. Better than any other stout you could ever get. There is a saying that the further away from Ireland you get, the worse the stout tastes. So if you want a really good pint of stout, if you want a really good pint of Guinness or Murphy's or anything like that, your best bet is to go to an Irish pub in Ireland, honestly. So they're drinking this magical stout, and eventually Constantine turns around to his friend to drink one last pint, only to find out that Brendan had already died. As they were drinking and enjoying each other's company and enjoying each other's ability to drink copious amounts of alcohol, at some point Brendan breathed his last, supped his last, and he's no more. As Constantine staggers out of the lighthouse, he's confronted by the First of the Fallen, who's come to collect Brendan's soul. Constantine turns around to him and says, well, you know, at least let me have one last drink with him whilst he's here, even if he is dead, and I hope you'll join me. So Lucifer says, okay, fine, I'll have a drink with you, no problem. I can, you know, your soul's going to be mine in any case for everything you've done, and I know you've got lung cancer, so you ain't going to be that far behind your friend in any case, so I'll see you with this one. So Constantine gets him a pint of stout. Unbeknownst to Lucifer, it's the magical stout. Lucifer drinks it, enjoys it, can understand what everybody's going on about, the fact that it's nice. And at that point, Constantine kicks over the table that had the pentagram and the candles on it, and as the candles are blown out as they fall to the ground, the magical stout transforms back into holy water, burning the First of the Fallen from the inside out. It's at this point that John Constantine picks up a bottle of wine, smashes it over Lucifer's head, and pushes him into the holy water fountain. He can't kill him because he's the First of the Fallen. It just takes him away and takes him back, sends him back to hell. Just as this happens, Constantine realises what time it is. It's gone midnight. He saved his mate's soul. Now all he has to do is save his own soul. So he decides to go back to London, and he talks to the angel Michael. He explains to him what's going on, and he says that he wants help, if possible divine help. The angel Michael just laughs in his face and says, do you really think that I'm going to help you after everything you've done, after all the trouble you've been to everybody in the mythical world and everybody else around him? Does he really think that the angel Michael is going to actually help him and save his life? He says, no, you're damned, you're going to go to hell, you are going to die and you are going to hell. Which you can understand cheeses off John Constantine no end. So he's trying to figure out how he is going to stop himself from dying and going to hell. He comes up with quite possibly is either the craziest or the most fantastic plan ever in the history of ever. He's going to sell his soul to 3 of the princes of hell. Not just 1, not 2, but 3 of the princes of hell. He knows that if he can pull this off, the 3 aren't going to be able to take his soul, because if even one of them tries to take his soul and drag it to hell, the other 2, because Constantine's soul is so riddled with sin and everything nasty and everything that the beings of hell love out of people, it will start a war so immense that it would probably destroy hell itself. So Constantine goes around what little friends and family he has left, says his last goodbyes. He has met previously this old guy called Matt, who is suffering from cancer as well. I believe it's bowel cancer. And he says his goodbye to him as well. He says his goodbyes to his sister and his best mate Chaz as well. And he goes off, finds an old building somewhere, and puts his plan in motion. He starts by selling his soul to the first Prince of Hell. Then when that one says yes, he was willing to be willing to take his soul, he then clears everything up, redoes the incantation, and sells his soul to the next Prince of Hell. Does exactly the same thing, and then sells his soul to the third Prince of Hell. After all this happens, and everything's been cleared out of the way, he's sure that everything's fine, Constantine then slits his wrists. An act of suicide. A final act of sin that would guarantee his soul to go to hell. As his life is slowly ebbing away, Lucifer, one of the princes of hell, turns up and says, I'm taking you with me. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to Lucifer, Constantine has sold his soul to the other 2 princes of hell, who also turn up at the same time. They talk and bicker and whinge and moan between themselves until they finally come to the conclusion that none of them can take Constantine's soul to hell, because it will, as Constantine knows, cause a massive war and destroy hell itself. So they come to a compromise. They will cure John Constantine of his cancer. They will give him a brand new body, which has nothing wrong with it, and they will keep him alive for the time being until they can figure out a way to break this bond that he has got over their heads, and one of them will finally take his sinful soul to hell. Of course, they didn't say they were going to make it painless. So Lucifer, whilst John Constantine is still alive and awake, rips open his chest and pulls the cancerous tumour out of his lungs. They then destroy his body with hellfire, turning his body into ash, and then from the ashes, with I could only imagine would be the immense pains of birth reawoken into him, he is ripped back into reality in a brand new body as an adult, as John Constantine, without the lung cancer, and as arrogant as ever, as is seen on the last page of issue 45, where he flips the bird to the 3 princes of hell. Constantine is rejuvenated. He's renewed. He To celebrate, he goes out and buys a packet of fags, a packet of cigarettes, and lots of bottles of whiskey, which he smokes and drinks excessively, just to like get his new body, work his new body in. He knows that his time is limited in this new body. There is going to be a point in his life when he's going to do something that is going to tip the balance, and something is going to happen that's going to mean the three princes of hell are going to be able to figure out a way of taking his soul to hell and killing him. But for the time being, he's okay. He's alive. He's got a new body. He's well. As he's walking in the streets of London, he bumps into an old friend. Her name's Kit, and she's also a friend of Brendan's, his friend who died in Ireland. They talk. They reminisce about the times when they all used to be around Brendan's and getting completely trolleyed on drinking too much. And then Constantine turns around and says, I've got to go and see my mate Matt. I've got to let him know I'm okay. So he goes to the hospital. He talks to his friend Matt. He introduces him to Kit. And Matt turns around to him and says, do the right thing. Stay with her. She's going to be good for you. It's at this point that Matt's time is up. And as he said in the previous issue of one of the issues of Hellblazer, as Matt said, when he goes out, he wants to go out in a big display of blood and shit. His words, not mine. The only thing is that when Constantine sees Matt die, he has this feeling that the way in which Matt had died isn't the way he should have gone. He has a feeling that one of the three princes of hell was making it worse for Matt in his death, just as a final dig at Constantine. When it's all over, Matt's dead. So many of Constantine's friends are dead and gone. John Constantine goes out into the rain, and he just wonders what he's going to do with the rest of his life. How he's going to play this out. He is in deep chikaka, so to speak. He turns around to Kit and says, maybe you shouldn't be here. I'm just trouble. All I do is get my friends killed. And that you shouldn't be here. And she turns around to him and says, I'm a big girl. I can look after myself. We'll see this through together. Now, when I first read this, I was just completely blown away. Yes, it's got a lot of religious, especially Christian religion motifs in it, but it is done in such a way that it's not preachy. It's not turning around to people who are reading it saying, if you're not virtuous, if you don't do what you're told, you'll go to hell, and if you do what you're told, you'll go to heaven. It's not that kind of preachy writing in this. It is about a man who is at the end of every avenue that's available to him, and he decides to make a deal with the devils. And at this point, it works. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have been at points in their life where they feel they can't turn to do anything, and they would literally do anything to get out of the problem they're in. And I'm sure, haven't been in that position myself yet, and hopefully not for a very long time, but I'm sure there's people out there that have been in the position of being close to death, where they would willingly do anything to save themselves. I would say that each issue of this represents one of the steps in understanding the fact that you are going to die. From the first issue, where he gets angry at the fact that the doctor is trying to get a sample of the demon blood that's in him, to the last one, where he comes to the realization that yes, at some point he will die, and there isn't going to be any magic around to actually help him. If you can find the trade paperbacks for these, because I'm not too sure how much these older issues of Hellblazer are. I know Hellblazer #1 goes for stupid amounts of money sometimes, but if you can find the trade paperbacks, and you know, you are interested in horror story but written in a really good way, it's not the normal sort of like gore and blood horror stories that you get nowadays. It's a really, really well written comic. I mean, even now, Hellblazer is probably one of the best horror comics that are out there at the moment. It's a little bit weirder now that Peter Milligan's writing it, but it's still pretty good. So yeah, if you can get the trade paperbacks, I would highly recommend getting the complete set of all of Garth Ennis's run on Hellblazer, which I think goes for about 5 or 6 trade paperbacks. I think 5 or 6 volumes. So yeah, definitely well worth picking up. Absolutely fantastic run. An absolutely fantastic run on an absolutely fantastic comic. Right then, that was today's comics. Tomorrow's is one of the last Viewer's Choice random selected comics that I'm going to be doing, and it was picked by, I believe, Comic Buyer, and it was JSA number 70 by Jeff Jones. So yeah, we go from that to superheroes. I told you my comic collection was eclectic. Did I tell you my comic collection was eclectic? I probably didn't. My comic collection is eclectic. So yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you everybody who's commented. If you like to comment, please do so, because I love reading comments, and I know I've been a bit slapdash and a bit lethargic on commenting to people at this moment, but trying to do a video every day does take a bit of time. So yeah, if you want to comment, that's fantastic. I love reading comments. Put the comments down below. If you know any more about the comics that I'm reviewing here, please, I am not the oracle of comics. I know a small amount of the comics that I read, and I'm sure there are people out there, I know there are people out there that know a hell of a lot more than me about the comics that I'm reading. So if you've got any insight in these comics, please put in the comment section down below. Yeah, so thank you all for watching. Thank you everybody for subscribing. Tomorrow, as I said, JSA number 70, and yeah, thank you all again for watching. See you tomorrow. Ta-ta for now.